What if I told you that Europe's strongest economy is, well, it's quietly cracking from the inside? And I'm not talking about some developing country or a failed state. I'm talking about Germany. You know, the industrial giant, the place that's practically synonymous with efficiency. So what on earth is really going on with Europe's economic engine? You see, the real question here isn't if Germany is struggling. That's becoming pretty obvious. The real head-scratcher is this. How can a country this rich be running out of money in the very places where people actually live? It's a total paradox, and believe me, it only gets stranger the deeper you dig. And the signs, well, they're suddenly popping up everywhere. Let's start with the absolute backbone of the economy, its factories. They're starting to go quiet. And it's not just that. At the very same time, you have mayors from all over the country, and they are sounding the alarm. I mean, they're openly warning that their cities are right on the brink of financial collapse. And listen, it's not just the public sector. Private companies are failing at a rate we haven't seen in, over a decade? This isn't just some economic slowdown. No, this feels a lot more like a systemic shock. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to break this whole thing down. First, we'll tackle Germany's shocking paradox. Then we'll dive into the crisis in numbers. After that, we'll figure out why the engine stalled in the first place, try to navigate Berlin's crazy money maze, and finally, look at what this all means for the country's future. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's start with this paradox, because it's a big one. You know, on the world stage, Germany is an absolute powerhouse, an industrial giant. But when you look closer, back home, the picture is, well, surprisingly different. It's like the giant is cracking from the inside out. But, you know, it's one thing to talk about a crisis, and it's another thing entirely to see it laid out in black and white, in the numbers. And honestly, the figures here are just staggering. They paint a really clear picture of the financial strain we're talking about. Okay, get a load of this number. Over 30 billion euros. Now, what's so important about this figure is where it comes from. This isn't some media estimate or a wild guess. This is the actual number that German mayors are using to describe the massive hole in their own city budgets. And the problem is just as bad over in the corporate world. We're looking at projections of nearly 24,000 companies heading for bankruptcy by the end of next year. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. That's like one company going under every 22 minutes. And of course, behind every single one of those failing companies are real people. We're talking about more than 285,000 employees who are directly affected by this, facing job losses, uncertainty. This goes so much deeper than just numbers on a balance sheet. It's a total domino effect, and you can see it cascading all the way down. I mean, look at the auto sector, the very heart of German industry. It's lost 55,000 jobs. And that pressure, it just trickles down to regular people. Personal bankruptcies are at the highest level we've seen in years, and you've got over 5 million people struggling with private debt. So the big question is, how did Germany even get here? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was more like a perfect storm of external shocks hitting at the same time as this massive internal gridlock. And together, they just caused that legendary German economic engine to grind to a halt. Okay, first you have these immense external pressures. When Germany lost access to cheap Russian gas, its energy prices just exploded. That made German manufacturing super expensive. At the exact same time, global demand for its famous exports started to weaken. And to top it all off, China went from being Germany's biggest customer to its fiercest competitor. A triple whammy. But the problems aren't all coming from the outside. Internally, Germany is grappling with its own huge roadblocks. We're talking about a maze of complex regulations, bureaucracy that moves at a snail's pace, and a massive demographic cliff, an aging society with a shrinking workforce. It's a simple equation, really. Costs go up and output goes down. And look, this isn't just some fringe analysis. The country's own leaders are now openly admitting that the problem is systemic. When a major political figure like Friedrich Merz comes out and calls it a structural crisis, well, that signals a huge shift. They know this is a deep, fundamental problem. Okay, and this brings us to what might be the most paradoxical part of this whole story, Berlin's money maze. Because while the federal government is announcing these massive spending plans, the cities themselves are absolutely starving for cash. So let's follow the money and see where it's actually going, and where it isn't. So to really get this, you first have to understand something called the debt brake. It's basically a rule written right into the Constitution that strictly limits how much the federal government can borrow. It all comes from this deep historical German fear of inflation. But the result today, it forces the government to get, well, let's call it creative with its accounting.
And here's what that creative accounting looks like. To get around that debt brake, Berlin created this massive 500 billion euro special fund. But, and this is the crucial part, look where that money goes. It's for big national projects, tanks, railways, power grids. What it doesn't do is flow down to the cities to fix the crumbling schools, the terrible roads, or the struggling social services that they're responsible for.
And the real-world consequences of this are, well, you can feel them everywhere. Cities are being forced to cut pretty much anything that isn't legally required. We're talking about colder swimming pools, libraries closing early, roads getting so bad they literally become urban legends. And get this, many government offices still communicate by fax machine because they can't afford to upgrade their IT. That is the reality of this funding gap. So all of this brings Germany to a really critical moment, a crossroads. It's facing a fundamental choice about its future. Does it go through with deep, probably painful reforms? Or does it just accept a long, slow period of managed decline? So, does this mean Germany is going to collapse? No, let's be clear. The country is way too rich and stable for that. But the most likely outcome, if nothing changes, is this sort of quiet, creeping privatization. A slow shift away from that proud public service model toward a society where you have to start paying to get the kind of services that used to be guaranteed for everyone. Ultimately, what this whole crisis has really done is shatter that old myth of German perfection. What's left is the reality. A powerful, capable nation that is just paralyzed. Paralyzed by its own bureaucracy, its own systemic failures, and its own political gridlock. And so that leaves us with the final, critical question, because the path forward isn't set in stone. Will Germany find the political will to make the deep, structural changes it so clearly needs? Or is the country just settling in for a long, slow era of managed decline? Honestly, the choice they make is going to define a generation.